Good afternoon. If you're joining us from India or wherever you are from, it's an afternoon time in India. It's 12 p.m. India Standard Time. So I welcome you to this webinar from Telric India. We normally do these webinars, kind of almost 3 times in a month, like second, third, and fourth Thursdays, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. India Standard Time. So today we have one more webinar and we're going to be looking at something known as React JS, or as it popularly known as React JS is a JavaScript library, and then we're going to be taking a look or taking a lap around what is React and how do you start with React and all those things. Those of you who are new, my name is Lohit Jian. I work as a technical evangelist with Telerik in India. I am also a Microsoft MVP in the area of ASP.NET and IaaS. My official email ID is lohit.nagaraj@telric.com. I'm available at Twitter with the handle @Kashyapa. So that's my Twitter handle. Kashyapas.com is my personal, you know, uh, blog, and telrichelper.net is something that myself and my colleagues in India, we keep writing on Telric related technologies. We keep posting our webinar videos there and all those things. Telric.com is our global website if you want to just go and then take a look at what exactly we do here at Telric. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be looking at a new JavaScript framework. It's known as React.js, React JavaScript library as it's known as. So again, you may be thinking like, hey, okay, we're going to talk about one more framework, in the world. Well, yes, that's how it is. That's how JavaScript world is changing, right? You have a lot of frameworks coming up, and then it's up to you to decide which one you want to go. And React.js is yet another framework which has been there from quite some time now. I think it's been close to 1 year, 1.5 years that React has been out in the wild, and people have been using React to build the project, large-scale projects, large-scale UI projects, where you have a complex UIs, you have composable things that you need in your project. So they've been using this for a while now. It's not as if like it just came out like yesterday or day before, but no, it's been there for a while, and it's been getting some traction in the community also. So that's the kind of a logo, or how Facebook puts it. So this is the logo of the React, and then according to Facebook or Instagram. So this was first developed at Facebook and Instagram. So it was a collaboration between the Facebook and Instagram teams, and they call it as a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Take a look at spend a moment to go through this statement. It's a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. It doesn't talk anything about other things except the user interfaces. So that should give you a cue, or that should give you a kind of a indication that, okay, what exactly this library is all about. Well, this library is for building UIs. That's it. It doesn't talk about the underlying controller or underlying model. No, it doesn't talk anything about that. It just simply says, hey, I'm a library, use it to build UI for your project. So that's the front end, or I like to call it as the UI layer of your projects, right? So I could build my UI layer of my web project using Kendo UI, because Kendo UI, we have the product called as Kendo UI. It's an HTML5 based widget library. So I can just bring in and then say like, hey, you know what, my UI layer in my project is going to be Kendo UI. Or I can go in and say my UI layer can be Bootstrap, or I can go ahead and say like, whatever other components that you can find in the market, that's what you can use to build the UI layer. So where what React is saying is, yeah, I can be that guy. I will be that guy. You build your own components, you build your own user interface, and I'm going to provide you that whatever features, facilities that you need for that, right? And of course, it's developed by Facebook and Instagram, so you can say like this backed by Facebook. For example, Kendo UI is from Telerik, and AngularJS is from Google. So React is from Facebook. So big names, and that typically I've seen in projects wherein people tend to go with projects which are backed by big names. You may want to go with Angular because, oh yeah, it's Google, so like that. So but whatever it is, it's ultimately up to you. You should have your own thumb rules. You should have your own checklist to decide, okay, is this the framework that fits me? Now I'm not going to talk about those thumb rules or checklists for now. Today we're going to be focusing on what is React. But I'm just saying that you may have a question in your mind that, oh wow, we have React, we have Angular, we have Kendo UI. Which one to go, right? That's very natural question. Well, as I said, at the end of the day, you know your project better. You know your complexities better. You know your requirements better. So lay out everything as a bunch of checklists or checkpoints, and then decide on which one you should go, right? So let's deep dive into React now. One of the things that React says is just the UI. As I said, it's a JavaScript library for building UI interfaces, right? So, and then Facebook tries to say, or if you see any of the presentations from Facebook or any of the videos from Facebook on the React, they will say like, hey, we are like, our React is like V in the MV star framework. So there is MVC, there is MVVM, whatever it is, but React just says one thing, and that's like we are the V in the MV star frameworks. You think of any framework, I can be there, because I'm very agnostic of the other things. I work with other things, and I know one thing, and that's the UI. So I let you build the UI, right? Another biggest thing in React is it uses a concept known as virtual DOM, or it's kind of a shadowing your actual DOM. So whatever components that you build or whatever widgets that you build in React is actually maintained as a virtual DOM, and then what it does is it's basically mocking the DOM internally within the React library. And whenever there is a change in the UI, right? So all it does is it does a diff between its internal mock DOM and then the new UI of your widget, and then sees it does a diff. When you do a diff, you know where exactly there is a change in the DOM, and then all it does is it computes the DOM mutation efficiently. And then for example, maybe you had a span getting changed, yeah, so it knows that it has to update only the span, and it updates only the span. Typically the Ember, the Angular, Kendo UI, all this, what we do is we re-render the whole DOM node, right? So here in this case, with the concept of virtual DOM, what happens is if there's a node that got changed, only that node will be re-rendered on your DOM, right? So that's possible because the React maintains its own DOM structure for your components, and then it's called as a mock DOM, or you can call it as a virtual DOM, or sometimes it is also referred to as a shadow DOM, right? Why? Because it can do this diff. If the DOM is nothing but a tree. If I have a tree and then I need to go and then figure out what the change in the tree, I would take the old state of the tree, take the new state of the tree, and then diff it, and then I will know exactly where the change is. So that's what React is doing under the hood. It does it for you. You do not have to worry about which one to go and then update, right? So basically it has lower memory footprint when it comes to rendering large items. Like for example, let's say you have a list with 10,000 items. It's people have done I couldn't put I didn't get hold of a graph, but I've seen or I've read where people have gone ahead and then done some metrics based on Angular and Angular 1.x and then React, that if there is a list with 10,000 items, the rendering time is faster in React compared to Angular 1.x. Of course, I'm not talking about Angular 2 here. I'm talking only on the Angular 1.x front. And then also the React, when it has to render 10,000 items, React seems to have a lower footprint of the memory compared to the Angular 1.x, right? So like that's because of this concept of virtual DOM. When I'm building, so it just goes ahead and then the mutations that happens on the DOM, that is you go change something on the DOM, is done efficiently in one pass. It doesn't do multiple passes. I think the way Angular works is it goes through a multiple passes in order to update the a particular changes, right? For example, if there's a batch of 10 changes, I don't think it does it in one shot, rather it does a couple of passes. Whereas in React, it just takes one pass, and then it knows where exactly it has to go and change it. So that's some of the things that React gives you out of the box. You do not have to worry about that. And the data flow is another interesting thing. We are all used to this concept of two-way data binding, meaning I have an element is bound to an object. If the object changes, the element gets updated. If the user types in the element or puts data in the element, the what you call the object gets updated, right? So that's typically what you call as a two-way data binding. And then people feel that, I mean, from the React perspective or from the Facebook perspective, they thought that, oh, it's little cumbersome, or it's little not easy to maintain where exactly the data is flowing. If you are building a large project and then you have too much of these data bindings happening, you often get confused with as to, okay, from where exactly is the data binding, where is the source of truth. We call our, so there's a terminology that we use, it's known as source of truth. Where exactly is the data, which is the true data, right? The truth. So what React does is it takes a completely different perspective on the data binding. It says, I'm going to use one-way reactive data flow. So that means if there is somebody who's owning a component, so the owned will provide the data to the owning component, right? Like that. So I have a parent, and then parent has, let's say, a component, child component. So parent will provide the data to the child component, and child component just updates its state. So when I go through some of the slides, you will understand that in React, everything is a component, and then all you do is you just change the state of the component. So a state is nothing but maybe a piece of data, right? So when I change the piece of data, yeah, React just goes and then re-renders the component. So when it re-renders the component, it already knew what was the state of the previous state and then the new state. So it just does a diff and then sees what exactly changed. Did I change a span? Did I change a span and a paragraph? Did I change a span, a paragraph, a list? So like that, it's able to do the diff because of this concept of the virtual DOM, and the data flows from the top, and then that's it. So you always know what is this one source of truth that your project needs. So you may ask now, I mean, of course, I've just done a theoretical thing about React. Some of the questions that you may like, okay, fine, why React, right? So just to answer that, I mean, according to Facebook, okay, anyway, everything that I'm putting up here is through Facebook, the documentation of React. It's not that I'm endorsing this, but rather I'm just trying to put up what React is all about, or what the documentation of React talks about. According to Facebook, React is simple, meaning you express your app the way it should look like. Right, typically in a HTML, what happens is you have div, you have that, you have this. So there's no concept of custom HTML component or custom HTML tag, right? So far in the HTML4 specification or even the HTML5 specification, you still don't have that what do we call as a custom element that I can go. I cannot go and then create an element called lohit, or I cannot create an element called as lohit list or something like that, because browser will say, hey, what are you talking about? I do not know what this element is all about, right? But with React, it's like I can just go in, because React is doing all the UI work. I can actually go in and create like a particular element called as lohit. The lohit can contain a child element called as whatnot. So like that. So it's like you express your app the way it should look like. So I need a search bar, I need a result table, I need a result row. Inside the result row, I have a result image or whatever it is. So like that, you can start expressing your app is what React provides you. And not only that, React automatically manages the UI for you. UI updates. You do not have to worry about, oh, now the user entered a name in the text box, so somebody needs to update that, display that name. Well, you do not have to go ahead and then say like, okay, hey, component re-render. No, the React manages that for you. You just worry about the state. Okay, did the state change? Yeah, okay, let React handle it. The UI update only when the underlying data changes. So that's another interesting concept React has. So I'm bound with a state or the piece of data, right? If the piece of data changes, then only that particular component or whatever is tied to that particular piece of data that gets updated or that gets re-rendered, and that's done by React automatically. So that's why they say, like, React is simple, declarative. When the data changes, React update the changed parts, right? So that you can see that when we start doing the component, you will see that I just say that, hey, here is a component and then here's a render method, or here's what should be rendered as part of this component. So that's why it's kind of declarative. And then composable components, the mindset in the React world is everything is a component. You build components, The components can be reused, so you're typically building a reusable components. Code reuse, testing, separation of concerns. Typically, if you take a look at the Angular's UIs or the anything, right? You just have a big div, and then inside the div you start putting some more divs, right? So if I go through the component world, so I can treat everything as a component. The whole page is one single component. Inside that, maybe I have a search component. After the search component, maybe I have a listing component. So like that. Now, you tend to see things in React world as components. Everything is component. You start building components, and then you can reuse a component in different pages. Typical example is, let's say you have a need for building avatar, right? For example, if I come in and then put my Twitter ID, so it should actually go to Twitter and then show my and it should typically show @ and my Twitter handle, and then my maybe pick from the Twitter, right? Maybe this particular requirement is there in 100 pages, right? So typically what you will do is you will have maybe copy paste the same 5 lines of code or 6 lines of code, because this is client side. I'm talking about completely client side development, right? You may be building a single page application. So how do you use it across there? Of course, Angular has its own way. It says, okay, create a directive, right? So here it's all about, I will create an avatar component, and then I just use the avatar component in whichever place I need. That's it. That's like that. So that's how simple it becomes. You build a component, it's like a controller, it's like a widget, and then you use it. So the Angular way is like, you build a directive, you create a component directive, and then start using it, right? I feel a little bit kind of that particular ng declaration of 1.x, I see it a little complex. I'll show you how simple React is. And of course, the Angular 2.0 completely overhauled framework. I think you guys will love 2.0, because it's kind of revolutionizing how you will actually do the web applications using Angular, right? So this is how React kind of lets you do. Let me now take you into the React world. So as I said, everything is a component in React, right? So this is a simple component which produces hello world or hello somebody's name, right? So what I'm doing is I'm creating something called as hello message. So that's the component name. And in React world, the components always start with a capital letter. So if you see here, it's H caps, and then it's like a camel casing but with caps, kind of stuff. So H and M are capital. So I said I want a hello message, and let me kind of zoom in if you're not able to see. So this is the code. We'll do all the demos, but I'm just trying to set the context here. So you just create this concept called as hello message, and then you have a display name. This is how the component will be accessed. And take a look at this. There is something called as react.create class. So if you want to create a component in React, you always start with this particular method called as react.create class. So this is React's way of telling you that, okay, I understand that this is a component, right? And then every component needs to provide this render method. So the concept is, hey, I'm going to call render when you're supposed to go on the page, right? When you're supposed to be shown on the page, I'm going to call the render. You better give me your markup, whatever markup that you want to show as part of this component. So that's what this render talks about. And what am I doing? I'm saying react.create element. I want you to create a div. I do not have anything at this point of time, and then the text is hello, and then the data that I need you to show next to hello is this dot props dot name. So this basically saying like this component will have a property called name at runtime, and that property called name will have a value. Get that value, put it here, right? Okay, so now this is this is how you do basically the React components, right? If you or me, or the first time that I saw is like, okay, really, do I need to do like this? Like for example, the render method is actually asking me to create an element. So what if I have a nested element? Well, you start creating nested create element functions. You start calling the create element repeatedly or in a nested way. That's complex, right? Basically what is happening is you are now jumping down into the JavaScript to create the complete component. Well, there's got to be a better way, right? So this is known as React's JavaScript way, or rather on the browser there's only one thing that can run, that's JavaScript. So this is typically what you will need to do. And of course, how do I render this particular component? Well, you just say react dom.render. I want you to create an element called hello message. So that's nothing but whatever we create the component, and then notice here at runtime I'm passing the value, or basically an object or a model to that particular. I'm setting a property called as name on the hello message component, and then I'm telling where should this component be mounted. So basically it's nothing but, you can create a div and say, okay, put this component inside the div. So that's what it means. If you felt, and then this produces this output here on the right hand side, right? Hello John, because I provided John as the value, right? Well, if you felt, hey, this is really complex, man, I mean, come on, what is happening here? Well, luckily Facebook or the React team has also come out with something called as Jsx, or JavaScript XML, or XML in the JavaScript, or markup in the JavaScript. So the same simple component that you saw here can be written as the follows, and this is JSX for you, right? So take a look at what I'm doing. I'm creating the same hello message, there is a render, and I'm now able to put a markup inside JavaScript, right? This is known as JSX syntax for you. Typically when you're working with React, this is what you will do, and then what you need is you need a JSX compiler, because remember, everything runs on a browser, and then browser has no clue what this is all about. Browser is going to say, are you nuts? What are you doing? This is not a JavaScript, it's a markup, it's a tag. I don't understand, what is this? Your JavaScript won't run at all, right? So you cannot run this directly onto the browser. So what you need is an intermediary step that's called as JSX to JavaScript conversion. And there are already JSX compilers available, or the transpilers as we call it. So in your production environment, what you typically would do is during development time, you start writing JSX. And then when the build time, what you do is you take this JSX, convert that into a JavaScript, and then that's the JavaScript that runs on the browser, right? But take a look at the syntax here. All I need to do is return, and then I just return the whatever markup that I need to get on the screen. And notice here how I'm able to use the property that I set. And then how do you set a property? Well, this is the custom element or the custom component, and this is the property. You just set a variable, and then that variable is made available to you on the rendering function, right? That's how easy it can get with React. Just conceptualize this. So I'm creating a component, and I'm just saying create this component somewhere. That is as simple as it can get with respect to the React. Now let's quickly go ahead and do this simple component, and then we'll see what can be done. What I've done is I've gone to React. Let me get that. Yeah. So here's the React website. So the website is at facebook.github.io/react. And what I did was I just went into the home page, and there is this download React v014.3. So I've already done that on my machine, and then I've already got all the required files. What I've done is I've created this folder called demos, and then in the libs folder, if you see here, I have included this react.js, and then I've included this react.dom. Now I'm going to be doing the transpilation of JSX to JavaScript on the fly at the runtime in Java in the browser itself. For that, I'm using something called as a Babel's browser version. Babel is a transpiler which knows how to transpile JSX to JavaScript, or ES6 to ES5, kind of thing. It's a transpiler. It's a very popular transpiler. So I'm going to be using that, but I'm going to be doing this in the browser itself. I'm not going to be doing a build step because this is a demo. But I would not advise this for your production related applications. In your production related application, you should run Babel as one of the build tasks. You should say, like, build, so if you're typically on a client side project, so you use gulp or a grunt. These are the client side task runners, as we call it. And in the gulp, you can create a gulp task, and then there are gulp packages available which know how to run Babel task. and in the gulp you just write a task and say, hey, here's a folder which contains .jsx files or whatever it is, and then I want you to convert them into .js files, and then that transpiler, the Babel transpiler, knows how to use convert JSX to JavaScript. So that's what you should do in your production, but I'm just using React and then the Babel browser version. And of course there's nothing else in the styles. I just put some bootstrap styling, and then there's an index.html. So here is the index.html. As you can see, I have pretty much nothing. I've included the bootstrap, and then I've included some navbar, and then here's a hello world. I just put a hello world. So now what I'm going to do is I will include the script tag, and in the src I will say this is libs slash, so what do we have, libs slash react.js, and of course I'm using a non-minified version so that during demos, if something happens, I should be able to see what is happening. And then I also need the babel hyphen browser dot min.js. Right now I can start away, I can start creating a component right away here. So what I can do is I can say script, I will say type is equal to, now here's something that you will need to see. So I need to do text slash Babel, because remember I said I'm using the in-browser transpilation, and then I need the Babel to pick this out and then convert the JSX into JavaScript file, right? So I'm going to remove this hello world, and then I will say id equals react container, right? Or we can say app. So this is our app typically. So I'm going to say app. Let me increase maybe my font size, and then I'm going to compile. So I just said div id app, and I'm going to just do whatever we just did there. So I'm going to say var hello message is equal to react dot create class, right? Let me just take a look at it. What it is, yeah. So we said react dot create class, and this is actually a like this, and then I'm going to call a render method, and this is actually a function, and you will need to return. Now I'm gonna just, so you will need to return. So first let's go ahead and then do a just a hello world from React component, right? Just we'll do it just a dummy component, and that's all. So I just have to say this, and then finally remember what we have to do. We just have to say react dom dot render, react dom dot render, and I just have to say what component do I want to render. So that's the hello message, right? So first I'm going to do just this. Now I need to tell where should I put this particular component. So I'm going to say document dot get element by id, and our id was app, right? Now if everything is done right, I would see hello world from React component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start as a simple HTTP server so that I can just get like a web app kind of server. I'm using a node module called as HTTP server. What it does is if you call HTTP server on any particular folder, it will convert that particular folder as a local browsable website, and it runs at 8080. You can change the port, everything. So I'm going to use this. So notice here it says starting up HTTP server serving on 8080. So now I'm going to open up this particular browser, which is Firefox, and then I'm going to say index.html, and well, everything worked well. So take a look at this. It says hello world from React component, right? So if you're thinking I am kind of bluffing you guys, so let me do this. I'm going to bring this guy. Okay, let's do this. On the left hand side I'm going to have the code, on the right hand side I'm going to have this guy, and now I'm going to say hello world from Lohit, right? So I'm going to refresh this guy, and we have hello world from Lohit, right? I didn't do anything. I'm just trying to make a point that this is actually live, right? You are able to see this. Now, I don't want this low hit to be hard coded. I want this low hit to be passed from the runtime. Remember in the example what we saw, there is this parameter being passed called as name, and then we use that parameter in the component. So let's try to do that. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to come in here and then say name is equal to, let's say, Rashmi. That's my wife, so I'm going to put that. Now I need to use that. So all you do is, remember, it's not a double brace as you would have seen in handlebars or anything. It's just this one, and then out of the box React provides you this collection called as props, and when I say this, it knows that I am inside this particular component. So that's why it's going to give you that complete properties collection, whatever it can have, and then it says this dot props dot name, right? I can now go back here, refresh it, and you will see hello world from Rashmi, right? So that's component for you, a simple component for you, right? And what else we can do? Well, I can go and then keep on adding multiple component, but the React can render only one node at a time, or React can render only one component at a time, right? So now if I want to add one more hello message, this won't run, because as I said, it just takes one parent node or a parent component to render. So what I can do is I can create another component and I'll call it as app, or I'll say React app or my app, right? Again, this is a react.create class, right? And now what I can do is, remember what we need to oops. So what we need to do is we just have to have a render method here, and this render method is actually a function. And what does this render method do? It returns some markup. So what if you have a multi-line markup, you can just create it like this, so that I have a multi-line markup. So I will say, hey, you know what, I want a div, and then I can just come in here and then do this. Name is equal to Lohit, and I will say br, and I will say Rashmi, right? So now what I did was I just created one more component. Now you'll try to get a feel of React's thing. Everything is a component, right? So now I can start composing my UI as a component. Now I cannot render hello message. If I do this, it's going to print only one. But what I need to render is I need to render my app. Of course, I don't have the parameter there, so I just have to do this. Now if I come back here and then refresh, we will see hello world from Lohit. Okay, I made a mistake. What mistake did I do? Let me check. What's the console error? Expected corresponding Jsx closing tag. Return hello message, yes. Okay, let me try this. Nope. Just give me a second. I think I hit somewhere something. My script. I'm out of my script now. Oh, okay. Let's see this. Nope. Enclosing tag. Okay. Let me try this. I know what is happening. Nope. Must be wrapped in enclosing. Okay, just give me a second. I'm gonna just look up something. Hello message. So that's what we have. Return. Okay, let's try returning one from here and we'll see what is happening. Okay, I'm gonna just say return this guy, and that works. So what if I want to do, okay, let me try this. Just give me a second. I have forgotten some step. Nope. Uh, Unexpected token. Okay, this is not the one then. So this and this must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Yeah, let me check. This was actually out of my what do you call script. This is not what I had in mind when I practiced. Somehow I stepped out of my. No, okay, we'll come back to that. Must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. We'll come back to that. I will take a look at what's where I went wrong, and then I'll come back and then I'll show you how to do these things. Return. Yeah, the one works. So this guy doesn't have a problem. Yeah, I'll come back. I'll take a look at it. But you got the point. So basically what you do is you start creating components like this. Then what did we have? Yeah, so the component life cycle. So I'll come back to that. So I know what mistake I might have done. So I'll go track back and then I'll figure out how to do that. So now what we saw was, we just saw only one thing. That's the render method, right? We are always calling a render method. Or here's a component called hello message. It has a render function. Here's my app, and then it has a render function. Then you just return a whatever markup that you had to show as part of that. So there are from a life cycle perspective, so since this is a component and you wrote a component, but where is that component? That component is going to be on the DOM itself, right? So there are three important life cycle points on the component itself. One is mounting, updating, unmounting. So mounting means, okay, you wrote the component and you told React, hey, render this component. So what does React has to do? Well, it has to take this markup and then put it onto the DOM. Until unless it is on the DOM, you will never see it on the page, right? It won't be rendered. So it has to be inserted into the DOM. So React provides this lifecycle step called as mounting, and it's going to be inserted into the DOM. So there are a couple of hook points, as we call it, available, which can be listened for. So one is component will mount, component did mount, meaning I'm about to mount this component onto the DOM. Okay, that's a point where you can go and then do something. I already mounted or I already inserted the DOM into the sorry, I mean I already inserted the element onto your component onto the DOM. Yeah, that's where it fires like, hey, I mounted the component, and you can do something on that. For example, one of the drawbacks that I saw about React is the way we have to create a component is completely through whatever JSX we showed you till now, right? What if I want to create a Kendo UI component there, or what if I want to create an Ember something, or what if I want to create an Angular directive, or whatever it is, right? So the way you do that is you listen for component did mount, right? And then you go and then ask React that, okay, give me that element, I want to convert that into a Kendo UI component. So that's how you do it. So you will have to always use the component did mount and then bring in the third-party widgets that you would like to use. Similarly, if you want to do a React, Bootstrap, yeah, that's the way, because Bootstrap components, if you want to add on to your React components, you will have to listen for component did mount and then call the Bootstrap's methods. Like for example, in Bootstrap, all you do is you just grab that element and then say, hey, convert this element into a Bootstrap modal, or convert this element into Bootstrap button, or whatever it is like that, right? Then updating. So basically, updating means, hey, I'm trying to re-render this component. Do you want to do something now, right? So you can come in and then do some custom algorithms or custom logic and then say like, hey, you know what, I know you got the state change and then you're trying to update this, but no, don't update this guy because I don't want this to be updated. Some logic that you want to write. Unmounting is when it is removed from the DOM, and then it will fire component will unmount function, and then you can do something like a cleanup or something that you want to do on the unmounting. So, and another thing that's there is the state component. So basically, as I said, properties are something that that keeps changing over the time, right? For example, the name property that we use. If I want to use the hello message again somewhere, well, I would pass another name, right? I would pass Lohit as one of the names, and then I passed Rashmi as the name for another component when it was rendered. State is something that's going to stick with your component, right? You got to of course, one of the thumb rules that React says is, hey, try to make your components as stateless as it can be, meaning it shouldn't rely on a state, right? But yeah, we all know it's not exactly what you can all the time. So sometimes I may have to create a state and then hold some data. Yeah. So that's the concept of a state. States are like a state machines. Or React sees components as a state machine, right? When it rendered for the first time, well, it was in one state. Then I updated data, so it moves to another state, right? The state changed of the component. So you update the component state and you render a new UI based on the new state. So that's the whole concept of React, right? It has a DOM created when it first rendered, so it has the old structure, and then when a state changes or I change the data, well, it re-renders the component, and I do a diff, and then I go and then update the virtual DOM, and then ultimately I go and then put it on the DOM. So how do you do that is basically there is a method called as get initial state. So you just define a JSON object or a JSON, like, it's a JavaScript object, like a key value pair, and that's it. And then whenever you want to change that state, meaning I want to update my data, you call the set state function, and then just, for example, I have a button click. On clicking on the button, I want to change the name. Well, yeah, you just call set state and then set the new value of a particular variable, and React will automatically merge the new value with whatever you started out with, right? If the name started out at initially was Lohit, and then at runtime a button click, I want to update the name to Rashmi, so yeah, that's the new state. So React will merge it, and since there is a state change, React will automatically go re-render your component. It figures out, okay, as part of this state change, who got changed. Maybe a span got changed. Okay, get me that span, and then it goes updates the span, right? So let's quickly see a simple component. I mean, the state-based component. We saw the simple component. We'll now see the state-based component. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a timer component now. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to don't worry, I'll come back to this. I'll see where I went wrong, and then I'll put the code. So what I want to do is I want to create a timer, and that timer should just keep ticking, right? So I'm going to say, so as I said already, so everything is a component. So I'm creating a timer component now. Create class, right? And remember, now we're going to bring in all the concept of the state and all those things. So for the timer, I need to start with a elapsed seconds kind of thing, or seconds elapsed, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this, or I'm going to listen to this method called as initial state. So I'm now giving an initial state to this timer, right? So what do I have here? I will have, so it's basically you just have to say return, and then you will say seconds elapsed. When I start, it's a 0 second, right? So I'm going to do that 0 second. So I just say initial state is 0. And then what I want to do is I need it to tick every second. So what I will do is in a function, I'm going to increment this particular seconds elapsed by 1, right? So I will go and then say a tick function. I'll write a tick function. Inside this tick function, all I will do is I will call this set state. Remember I talked about set state. So I'm now changing the state of the component. What is it? Well, the state of the component is the seconds elapsed will be, this is another way you use the already existing state. So you say this dot state dot seconds elapsed plus 1. Okay, so it's as simple as this. So I'm just changing the state of the component every second, right? But how do I create a ticking, right? So the tick can be done only when the component has been mounted. So I'm going to say component did mount. So I'm listening for, hey, did we create this component on the DOM? Yes. Okay, now let me do something. What is it? I'm going to just call, uh, I'm going to create a variable called as this dot interval is equal to, remember we have the set interval JavaScript function. What it does is it's going to call a very specific function every so and so seconds. I'm saying, hey, I want you to call this tick method every second, correct? And we are calling this tick method only when the component was created. The timer component gets created, then only we are calling this particular um, uh, the function, right? Okay. Well, it's a good practice to do a, so we need to do this, we need to do this, and then it's a good practice to do component will unmount. So what I need to do is I don't want to leave the interval function hanging in the memory. So I will say clear interval this dot interval, right? I just clearing it. So now the main part, render. So we just wrote some stuff so far, but it's nothing without the render function. So I say render. In the render, what I will do is I'm going to just output a simple like this. So I will say div, and I will say elapsed seconds. And how do I use it? Well, this dot state dot seconds elapsed. That's all. So I get the value from the state. Remember, I want it to be stored in the state. So I'm not providing a property here now, but rather I want its state to be altered every time. So we created a component. So let's go over it again. So I'm creating a timer component, and I'm saying get initial state. It's set to 0, and then I wrote a tick function. So I want this tick function to be run every second, but when the function executes, I'm just changing the state of the component. What do? I take the elapsed component of the previous elapsed component and just add it to 1, and then set it to the set it as a new value. And I call this tick function only when the component has been mounted. So I say set interval this dot tick every second, and then if the component is being removed, I mean it's getting to remove, it's going to be removed, I go and then say clear the interval, because I don't want to hang that interval there. Then render function, all I'm doing is I'm just saying div elapsed seconds, right? Now how do I use this component? Well, it's pretty similar what we did previously. React DOM dot render, I will say timer, and document dot get element by id. I think we set it as app. That's it. So now if everything is fine, then we will have a timer running in our page. What's the problem again? Unexpected token render. Oh, okay, I missed a comma here. Okay. And there we go. So we have created a successfully running timer. So what if you wanted a timer? I can change this to maybe a date time, right? It's up to you, whatever you want to show. You wanted a running, a date being shown on some pages, right? Now you can create a timer function, and then you can use this timer function wherever you want, right? So I hope you got the idea of what exactly this particular component did. It's a simple component but it is showing a lot of the React features. One is, I have a state, then I have a tick, I'm changing the state at runtime, and then I'm using the lifecycle events like component did mount and then component will unmount. So now if I refresh again, it starts from 0 because the page started, then you were rendering it for the first time. So elapsed second starts 0. I can always put a button somewhere and then say like, hey, you know what? When the button is clicked, set the state to 0. Yeah, I can do that, so like that. but I hope you got the idea. So that's something about the components and then stateful. Now, this is something that you will hear very widely when you're talking, when you're looking at React things. People will start talking about thinking in React, right? So the concept is simple. Let's say your requirement is like this. I want you to show a search bar, and then below the search bar I want to have a listing, and each row is nothing but a what do you call the product, but the product has to be having a category rows also. For example, if you see there, I want to show the name and price of a particular what do you call the name and price of the product, but I need that to be categorized by the categories also. So I need a row called as sporting goods, so that's one category, and then all the products under that should come below that, and then I have one more category called as electronics, and then you start building I mean you will get the other products from the electronics. But if some product is out of stock, notice there it's been set in red color, right? So, those kind of uh, things is what you will I mean, this is a requirement that you want to build like this. So how do you think in React way? Well, it is as simple as this. You should start looking at how do I break this down into component, right? At the root, meaning I have a filterable product table is what I should get. So notice the outer boundary with this is like an orange color border. So that is the component, right? Filterable product table. And then if you start jumping inside this product component, you will see that there is a search bar. The search bar and the list, they're two different distinct capabilities, right? So now I can go and create another component, call it as a search bar, and then I'll put a search bar, and then inside the search bar I will have a text box, and then you enter some values into the text box, all those things. Then notice there is a green outer border. That is actually the product table. So whenever you search something, I show it in the product table, right? And then you have categories row coming, and then you have product row coming, correct? So there's a product row and then there's a category row. So this is how you break it down into a reactable UI, or the UI thinking in React. So you create a component called as filterable product table. The filterable product table will have search bar and then product table, and then the product table in turn will have product rows and then category rows component. And then product row, all you do is you just put a tr or a div or whatever you want, and then you build it. But if you go to React's website, there is this link called as Thinking in React, a fantastic article or a documentation that is there. It says Thinking in React. So I just took this example from there. And here you have complete breaking the UI into a component hierarchy. This is what I was talking about. So you have the filterable product table, search bar, product table, product category row like that. And this is how you build it, right? Notice here how they have put the hierarchy. This is the root component, and then that contains this search bar component, and that contains the product table component. The product table in turn will contain a product category row and a product row, right? So you start building components like this. So take a look at here. So let me live zoom in. So this is the product category row. So what does product category row contain? It contains a tr, then a th, and then this is the props.category, and then here's a product row. So what they're doing is, if this props.product.stocked, if it is stocked, then get the name. Otherwise, take a look at how we are creating the markup, right? So it's basically, it is getting the span set to red color, because if it is not stocked, and then I'm just returning tr, td, tr, and then this. Then if you take a look at the product table itself, I have a render function. I need the rows. I'm looking for the categories. So products dot for each, if the category was like this, I'm going to output, I'm going to push this product category row. Otherwise, I'm going to push this product row. And notice here how I'm passing the data itself. The data, the product is actually being passed like this. And then this is a simple table tr, and then here it is, t body rows. That's it, right? And then the search bar, the important one, right? So you create a form, and then you say input type text placeholder is so and so, input type checkbox, only products in stock. And basically once the form is done, take a look at what happens to this. This is the initial whatever code. So you will have to listen to the on change of that input, right? And this is how it does. Everything boils down into this one. If you see here, filterable product table, react.create class, render. Notice here what we did. Div, search bar, product table. That's it. And then everything is going to come in here. So if I go to the HTML, so the result, it's still not loading, I think. Yeah, there we go. So this is how the whole stuff has been done, right? By doing the component, by breaking this whole UI into a component, breakdown, I'm able to just create it. I can focus on only one thing. So now if I have to change anything in the searching, I know I have to change the search bar. Maybe I just need to color it or whatever it is. So that's this is a pretty interesting article. You should take a look at this. They talk about when to use the props, when to use the state, and then the identify the minimal representation of the UI state, then identify where your state should live. So this is a important concept that you will need to understand. Where should I put a state? On which component should the state be there? So usually the parent, the grandparent contains that. The inverse data flow I was talking about. So for example, when there is a change, I mean, if you enter something in the search bar, somebody should go and then do the change, right? I mean, it should give you the updated one, right? So this is what you do. On change, you say this dot handle change. So what is the and handle change? It's just a function in the search bar, and then he looks for somebody who can handle the input, and this input will be on the product table. If you see here, handle user input, and he just goes ahead and then sets the text, so the state of that particular component, which is filtered text, and then in stock only true or false, and you will pass those things down to each individual components. If you see here, products table, I'm passing the filter text what was there. So if you typed something in the text box and then that's a change that happened there, React will automatically go and then also update the products table, because you know you are using that particular value, the filter text, the state filter text. So this is the concept of this is how React works things. So there's a state change. He's going to figure out who needs to change, then he will call the re-rendering of that particular thing, and then we don't have to worry about that. We as developers should worry about, okay, when should I change the state, and that's it. So as you can see here, it will automatically work. So this was pretty much, as I said, a very, very, very level 50 or whatever you can call it, introduction to React.js. I know I haven't gone completely into advanced things in the React.js. Maybe in coming days we'll start it. We'll take a look at React and Kendo UI. How do you work with like this? So you want to use React as the UI layer, but you want to bring in Kendo UI controls. So how do you handle stuff in those situations? Because it's tricky. It's not easier. It's a little tricky. And then we'll come back in a future webinar and then we'll take a look at that. This, as I said, was kind of getting started, getting your feet wet on the React world, and I hope it gives you kind of a starting point. I gave you the jump start on React. What is React? Why should you use a React? And then how do you use a React, right? Well, I'm going to stop the webinar for now here and then take a look at the